I want to go firstly to Bruce Hawker, a former Labor strategist and regular with us here on Sky News. Bruce Hawker, what do you make of this, and do you take on face value the arguments from all those three we just heard from that this has nothing to do with any lack of confidence in the government's ability to win?
I do accept that, David. I think that's pretty clear from the tone of the press conference and from the two people who we've seen with the Prime Minister. What I do take issue with, I think, is the timing of the announcement. It's been a terrible week for the government, and this, I think, will just add to the sense that they're abandoning the government rather than that this is an orderly process of change within the government. I think I would have waited a while, I think, for things to settle down, because it's been a tough week for them.
Or indeed, why not announce at the end of last year? If both had approached her 12 months ago, which presumably is around the time of that Rudd leadership challenge or just after it, why not announce it at the end of last year? Why start the year with this sort of change?
Yeah, I think there's some merit in that proposition too, because portfolio changes do require ministers to settle in. It's tough in the first weeks of a new portfolio getting your head around them, and these new ministers are going to be thrown into very demanding portfolios like Attorney General, immigration, with only days' notice.
Preparation. Yeah. That's right, 2 days preparation.
I think I would have either waited or gone earlier, but it was obviously a judgment call by the Prime Minister and her office.
I guess the questions were put to the Prime Minister there. Will others now follow suit? It's not unusual for ministers, and this was the case in the Howard government as well, in the lead up to an election, weighing up their future, deciding I'm not going to recontest and serve another term. She said she's not aware of any others contemplating that, or they haven't come to her. But what do you think, Bruce? Do you expect others to do so between now and September?
I would not be surprised if one or two others said, look, it's time for me to hang up my spurs. I've had a good innings. And there's nothing really controversial about that, but because the government's struggling at the moment, it's inevitable that Tony Abbott and others will say, oh, this is rats deserting a sinking ship and so forth, when in fact everybody's got a shelf life in politics. People like Nicola Roxon, young daughter, looking to have a life after politics, perfectly understandable. Chris Evans, somebody who's given 8 years as a Labor leader in the Senate. I mean, it's a remarkable achievement to have survived that, given the state of the Senate, and before that as Immigration Minister. I mean, these people have really thrown everything into their portfolios. You can't begrudge them or other long-serving ministers and members from saying, look, now's the time for me to move on. I just query the timing of it. I think this week it'll just add to this bad week that they've had. Maybe they think it's best to get it out of the way now, but I think that it's really just going to exacerbate the sense that the government's in a bit of a crisis at the moment, when they don't really need to do that.
Well, let me go back to you then, just to pick up on there about the changes that Julia Gillard's gone with, and Troy's point earlier about members of the New South Wales right in particular being promoted here. Chris Bowen, Mark Dreyfus, Chris Bowen, Mike Kelly amongst them. What do you make about the changes she's made? Are they sensible?
Look, I think they're good, and of course Jason Clare being promoted into Cabinet as Secretary of the Cabinet is a very good move. I think he's got future leader written on him, and it's about time he was in the Cabinet. I think all those moves make sense. Everything in this whole exercise makes sense except the timing. That's the only thing that really jars so excruciatingly with everybody now, because it just adds on to the sense of of chaos in the government, and they didn't need it. Spare a thought, by the way, for the West Australian Labor Party, who are in the middle of an election campaign right now, and they're about to lose one of their senators. He's going to be replaced by somebody else. All of that is something that they didn't need after having a pretty good week in campaign.
And that could happen really any time, because we should remind people that in the Senate you don't need a by-election. The party just replaces you, and he seemed to suggest that as soon as they settle on someone, he'll go.
That's right. He was making it very clear that he wasn't going to be staying around until the next election. So that's all something which the Labor Party in Western Australia now has to deal with in the middle of an election campaign. So that's tough for them. But as to the promotions, I think they're excellent. I think it's about time Chris Bowen was relieved from the agony of having to deal with immigration. He's a very capable minister. Mike Kelly, somebody else who's obviously one of the rising stars in New South Wales. So all in all, I think those moves were all very sensible. Mark Dreyfus, a QC coming into the cabinet, all good moves. But I just scratched my head at the timing. I mean, it's been a week horribilis, you'd have to say, to bastardise Latin, and it's really topped it off with this, which will just give Tony Abbott a bit of air in a week where he hasn't performed very well himself, and where all the focus should really be on him as the alternative Prime Minister and his shortcomings.
Well, Bruce, I've got to ask you, as someone who's been, of course, so closely associated with Kevin Rudd and that push in the leadership last year, does this horrible week, as you've called it, mean anything in terms of internal moves on Julia Gillard?
I don't think Kevin Rudd's going to be in the business of challenging. So I think everybody inside the parliamentary party now will just say, look, let's put this behind us. Let's try to refocus, almost pretend some of this stuff didn't happen and get on with it, start again, because whatever they thought was going to be a good start to the year obviously hasn't happened, and they're going to have to make some big inroads into the opposition in the next few weeks in Parliament. And I think that's where Gillard's really got to focus now.
Yeah, Bruce, this will be done as seamlessly as possible?
Well, that should be the plan. And of course, judging from the events of the last week, I'm sure that'll happen. Look, I have to agree with Troy. I think that Penny Wong is the standout candidate. Obviously Bob Carr, but he's got heavier responsibilities overseas as Foreign Minister. But Penny Wong would be, the standout leader in the Senate for Labor, and I hope that they do decide that she's the choice, but we'll wait and see.
Look, just before I let you both go, I want to show you a picture of Kevin Rudd. I'll just see if we can find it here. This is something that he tweeted late last night himself. He was pictured, of course, in the last couple of days with the chainsaw in hand, helping some of the flood victims in his electorate of Griffith in Brisbane, breaking up some trees and whatnot. And then someone's helped to put this together, and have we got it there? He tweeted this. There you go. Bruce, is that the Kevin you know?
It sure is. I like the army of Dorkness under it. I think setting himself up is part and parcel of his style.
Although I must say, Dave, I've never seen Kevin in bright purple pants before, but you never know. I think he is a man of the people, and he's out there doing his bit in the community, and the speculation, whether they like it or not in the Labor caucus and the community, will just never go away.
I think that's probably right, despite the fact we are getting closer and closer to that September 14 election date all the time. Troy Bramston, Bruce Hawker, thanks so much for joining us with your analysis on this reshuffle announced today. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.